Hey, welcome back to Diabolic Shrimp, the least professional talk show on the internet. I'm your host, best-selling author and comic creator Josh Grant, and today our special guest today is Dr. Ian Miller. Dr. Ian Miller, he's been part of Diabolic Shrimp for years. He's written a lot of wonderful sci-fi. Like thrillers as well, and kind of mixes a lot of science and like kind of thriller kind of stuff and history as well. And fantastic books. I read The Puppeteer. We'll talk a bit about that. We'll talk all about his books. Just a little bit about him before we start. If you want to check out more about him, we have his links in the description to his website down below, as well as to his books. He also writes like sheet music, and I wish I could play some for you because I love the piano and I loved his music. But unfortunately, my program won't let me play it. So check out his music. It's on his website down below. You can actually listen to samples and actually buy some of that sheet music as well. If you're joining us live, we always love to be interactive with you, and we love to bring up your questions if you have questions for Dr. Miller here. So in the live chat over there, throw your questions over there. I would love to honor you. I would love to share your questions. Just a bit about him before we bring him on. Ian J. Miller was born in 1942 at Hokitika, New Zealand, and received a PhD from the University of Canterbury, New Zealand. He became the head of applied chemistry at Chemistry Division, DSIR, New Zealand, before leaving to set up his own chemical research company. His involvement in ventures to make, and I'm going to butcher it, to make pyromelatates for heat-resistant plastics and seaweeds led to his becoming a director of 2 ICI joint venture companies. He has also self-published 2 sets of books, together with 100 peer-reviewed scientific papers. I give him kudos. That's amazing. His scientific work has involved seaweed, and again, I'm gonna butcher it: seaweed polysaccharides, liquefaction of biomass, photochemistry, as well as theory. His work on scientific theory has led to 2 ebooks entitled Elements of Theory, which show how to form scientific theories by using the methodology known as induction. The author is now semi-retired. It doesn't sound like it. He lives in Lower Hutt, New Zealand, and is mainly working on completing a series of science fiction and thriller novels involving a futuristic history. Now, a wonderful list of accomplishments. He's been waiting in the wings for a bit, so let's bring him on. Dr. Ian Miller, welcome to Diabolic Shrimp.
Thank you very much, Josh.
Oh, it's so great to have you. I read The Puppeteer, I think years ago, and that was a fantastic one. It was this really cool like thriller, but again, you always like to mix science into your stuff, and so it's really fun to see how you balance that in your work.
Sorry, there was an internet glitch. I missed the middle of what you did there. So I'm not quite sure. I didn't hear it properly.
I was like, that's okay, Ian. I was like, everyone calls this show an internet glitch, actually. So I was saying, I loved The Puppeteer, and I love how you kind of mix science and kind of thriller into your books. So Ian, did you? I always think a great way to introduce people is through show and tell. Did you bring us something for show and tell?
Yes, I did actually. Now this is going to be. I don't know how we're going to.
Oh, cool.
Trying to get this into perspective. I've got to hold it, and you don't want to see my hand, but this is sort of an egg cup.
Interesting.
And how I got this is when I was at the DSIR, you mentioned there that I was trying to promote this pyromelate.
Mm-hmm.
Scientific journal Nature came to New Zealand to do a survey of New Zealand science, and they talked to the head of the DSIR at the time, my ultimate boss, Director General or something. And he made this statement that there was some eccentric scientist out there that thought you could make heat-resistant plastics in New Zealand. And it got written up in Nature. I'm one of the very few people that's been written up in Nature as an eccentric, thanks to my boss. And what the staff there decided to do was to make this and hand what they used to do is just before Christmas, they'd have this little sort of dinner, or sort of social gathering, in which they would here's people, but somehow or other that got in there. So that's me, an eccentric, officially an eccentric. And the funny thing about it was, what was so eccentric was that I was actually doing my job that was supposed to be doing according to the mission statement of the organization. I suppose it was eccentric that I was one of the very few people that had actually read the mission statement.
I think that is. I was like, anyone that actually reads the mission statement is eccentric. So, well, I'm gonna add that to your title at the beginning of the video here, Doctor Eccentric Dr. Ian Miller, and so I love that. I think it's my goal in life to be labeled as an eccentric. I think that's a compliment in the scientific world. So, well, Dr. Miller, and again, our internet is going a little wonky, but that's why we're the least professional talk show on the internet. So, but if it goes wonky, don't worry, just keep going. So, Dr. Miller, I want to dive into your life. You've had this amazing life. Life of scientific research. So let's kind of start with you had a crazy adventure you had with during the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. You had to kind of you had to leave the country during that. So tell us a bit about that. Tell us what happened there.
Oh, yes, that was one of the more interesting parts of my life. It was in August 1968. Yeah, I was spending a year in England, and for one's summer holidays, one goes somewhere. Now, being somewhat eccentric, I decided to have a go. I drove round behind. That easy to do at those times. And on one of the days, it was rather fascinating. I actually had a time to drive along the left-hand side of the road because I overtook a motorized division that was in Poland heading towards, they were actually heading towards Czechoslovakia. I stopped for the night at Krakow, and then I went out and had a look at Auschwitz, and then drove into Czechoslovakia and stopped at this little place. Well, getting in was sort of difficult because the border guards didn't seem, I now know why they didn't know what to do with me, but they couldn't leave me in Poland because the visa was running out that day. And so a little cafe or something, and the first thing, because I thought it was about time for lunch, had a beer and all that's what you do. And the locals came up to me and wanted me to put a flag on my Czech flag on the aerial of my car, which I let them do. I still didn't know at this stage that the invasion was on. And I soon found out, but I left the flag there anyway. And there was quite an interesting sequence of things that happened. I had my first, I tried to get somewhere to stay for the night, and you couldn't. I didn't realize, it's really funny. I got to this place with a hotel there, and they there, and the guy that was supposed to be in front of it, and sorting things out, said he spoke 13 languages, but none of them were English, French, or German, which was about all I could manage. And I didn't manage French and German all that well either, although I had been in Germany for a little while. German I could sort of handle. And anyway, I drove on, and then it got dark. And the first thing that nearly killed myself, come over this thing, over this brow, and there was seemed to be a little fire on the side of the road, and there was something sort of told me there was something wrong. So I slammed it. I was going about 60, 70 mile an hour.
Uh-huh.
And I swung the car. I suddenly realized what it was. There was a tank with blackout, sort of camouflage netting over the top of it, sitting parked in the middle of the road. So I managed to dodge this to the left. There's a hell of a shower of stones went over those guys down below, because this, there's no seal on the shoulder on the left. And fortunately, from my history of driving in New Zealand, I had practiced some drive.
Cliff driving, or
Yeah, I know people probably wouldn't normally approve, but at least they saved my life because I held the slide.
For anyone vacationing in New Zealand, if you almost get rammed off the road, that's official eccentric Dr. Ian Miller there.
Anyway, when I kept going, I decided that you couldn't risk. So I stopped at, there was a little sort of place where the road had a T-junction, and the main road went down to the right, and some people came and tried to offer to help because they saw the Czech flag. And so I said I needed somewhere to stay. I couldn't keep driving like this. So they dragged me down there and told the guy, owning the hotel, okay, it might be a bit illegal, but he either put me up or they burn the place down. I think it was an empty threat. But anyway, I had the night there and went to out back to the junction where they're putting up road signs. And I had my one little contribution to military history here. This division that I'd seen in Poland started to drive in.
Uh-huh.
Gone through the correct way. They were busy turning around road signs. And my little contribution was to get somebody out in the middle of the road to point the right way. And as expected, the invaders didn't believe it, so they headed off down the back road. Eventually, they didn't. They worked that out and they stopped. And this was interesting too, because the guy that stopped had gone on. He decided he had to back out. What he forgot was he had an artillery piece, 105mm cannon on the back, and or howitzer, and he rammed through the windscreen of the following truck.
That's one way to use your artillery to destroy something, I guess.
I later found out that division had been split up 5 ways, and it took them 3 days to get back together again. So, I had a little sort of thing. And, later on, of course, I went into Praha, and there's all sorts of things about that, but I don't know how long you want me to talk about that.
Oh, well, we can swing back to, I was like, I'll let you talk about that all day. I'm always just fascinated. I mean, my family was in Germany during the Cold War in West Germany, and was part of all that as well. And so, but let's connect it to your writing then, because we're here to talk about your writing and your amazing books, right? And so it's like, how did this experience, because that's just an incredible experience, being in a country when it's being invaded, and sometimes we see in the movies like invasions being this crazy amount of explosions and things, right? It's like sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a little bit more quiet invasion. And so tell us, how does this experience, being in an invasion, affect your writing?
Yeah, the two things that sort of struck me, there was a time well, there's one thing where there was a protest in Wenceslas Square,
Uh-huh.
and what there was a yellow line across the road, or across the middle of the square, and the Russians were on the other side with submachine guns, and their attitude was that you can have your side of the yellow line, cross it, and we'll shoot you. And I got the hell out of there. I decided it was time to get a building between me and it.
Uh-huh.
And the corner and had some good solid stone between me and it, and the machine guns opened up.
Wow. Yeah.
One saw tanks and one did things. What one about there were 3 or 4 times when I heard the machine guns firing from various reasons. But the first thing that one found was that in these situations, the violence is sudden, it's short, and it doesn't go on and on. This is where movies and that I think get very, very wrong.
Uh-huh.
In any fight scene or something like that, what happens in the first 5 seconds more or less determines what's going to happen. Okay, not in a major war, of course, but in a sort of a thing like that, this means that sure, I do have some action scenes.
Sorry, Ian, you froze for just a second there. Can you back it up just a second? So what were you saying? You do have some action scenes in your book.
Yeah, but I try what I do, unless there's a good reason not to. They tend to be brief and to the point. Mm-hmm. You know, they resolve very quickly, like that sort of thing. Now, the second thing that affected me was after all that shooting and that, I had to spend some. I had to fill in an hour or so, so I walked up to the Charles Bridge over Vltava, and there was an officer, a Russian officer there. I don't know what he rank absolutely was. I picked from this. I'm not good at picking things on
uniforms,
Russian, yeah. But he'd be, judging by what was on his epaulets, he was much more than a lieutenant or a captain.
Uh-huh.
And he spoke German, and he actually wanted to talk to me for some reason or other. And we actually had a conversation there which lasted for about 20 minutes. And he of course was sort of surprised that the Czechs didn't like this. They were instructed to go in there. They thought they were saving the Czechs from this dreadful capitalist blah blah blah.
Well, and that's kind of still the narrative too, in a sense. It's the interesting.
Yeah, and but basically, what one got from this is that the guys that are on the real front end of the thing are actually human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And the officers are actually also rather, on both sides, will be rather sensible about things. You don't get the, this is, arrogant, useless, thicker was the opposition. And it's not like that.
So, well, and that's the interesting is it's like, and that's definitely been an interesting experience of mine of like in different situations it's the human factor. It pulls it in that it's not as much this like higher level ideal as when you get on the ground level, there is a lot more interaction and that human side of things. So, and something I loved about your books is, like I said, the puppeteer was excellent, and it was kind of that political thriller in a way, and it had a lot of it had a lot of that realism that I found just in I survived a flash flood. It's a very different situation, but being in a realistic situation, you do realize it's nothing like the movies. It's very different.
Sorry, I lost you then.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's like I survived a flash flood, and I realized through that situation in my life, it's nothing like the movies, and you have this very human factor, and people react very differently than you expect, I guess, and it's just interesting to see that in your writing through hearing your experience now. So for another big influence in your writing and your in life is science. It seems like, and so what got you interested in science, and why is science important? Like, how does it affect your writing?
Why did I get interested in science? That's an interesting question, and the answer is I don't really know. I sort of got that way as a kid, and I suppose one of the first things that got me interested in space was when I was, about 8 or 9 or something like that. We didn't have television, but they had radio shows in New Zealand, and there was one program for kids on, and I used to listen to that all the time, and about the solar system and all that. And eventually they had a quiz, and I went down to the local library. Now, the funny thing about the Hokitika Library was that at the time was that it had been set up by a rich American or something back in about 1880, 1890. The gold, this is when the gold rush was on. The town was swimming in money, or was swinging in gold anyway. It was one of those sort of 2-week wonder sort of booms, or 2 years away. I mean, it was at one stage the river had 50 ships in it all the time.
Definitely. I live out in the West in the United States, and it's very similar. It's like the boom and bust.
I mean, these guys were all the same. Huge number of people. A few people made a lot of money by selling shovels, and a whole lot of gold miners didn't. They lost most of what they made.
Yep.
That had been given, and it had just about everything that was known about the solar system in 1890. And funnily enough, that was just about everything that was known about the solar system up until NASA started sending probes out. So for a little while, even as a kid, I knew about as much about the solar system as most people, other than, the actual astronomical, just where everything was at when. And I got interested in it, and I guess that carried through to the rest of my science.
Nice. Well, and so how does you tend to put science, like you mix science and kind of science and like a morality sometimes too into your books, like kind of history almost. And so why do you do that? Why do you think it's important to have in there?
Yes. Well, one of my little themes or objectives, if you like, is that I believe that change everything else like that. The oil thing. Basically, we have got ourselves into a position where we can't go back. We can't go back to the horse and cart type society. There's too many people. There's not enough. If you think there's an oil crisis, there's a hell of an oats crisis if we try to go back. So I think there's ways out of these things, but we actually have to think about them reasonably. We have to think about, if we want an answer to a scientific problem that we've got, I'm afraid we have to use the scientific way of getting out of it. And so one of the themes of my books is that I try to explain how science works. Now, and no preaching, nothing like that. You've just got to try to show it. Now, in the book that I suggested to you,
let's see. You cut out for just a second, but it was Sky Viola, right?
Yes. What happened? The basic. You were going to read the introduction, or someone was going to read the introduction to the first sentence to that, which actually covers quite a lot of the book. It's a surprise. This is part of the reason I chose it. It was a particularly illustrative first couple of sentences or something. It tells quite a lot about the book. But anyway, the concept was that this young Roman had to go and get help for a crisis that was going to occur in the 24th century. The message was sent back into time. That's the prophecy. And how would a really advanced civilization look at someone from ancient Rome? There had to be
like
some
a god or whatever, and so
no, there had to be and that got their attention. Now, the thought was, well, what happens if you saw Galileo? Would you be interested?
So, well, yeah, I'm from a science background, so I would be fascinated. But
yeah, well, that's the thinking. So, what Scaevola was given a couple of tasks, and one of them was to work out from Rome, from what Rome knew, that the Earth went round the sun. There's a couple of reasons for this. The one is, if he's going to be abducted by aliens, he has to know what weightlessness is, and he has to know why it is. So he has to work out what actually an orbit is. And so the thing about this is it was what I've done there also has shown just how science actually, how you think. And of course, in this case, in the story, quite a lot of it comes by accident. He actually sees something that he didn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually how science really works.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of scientific discoveries are not made the way you might, the way that the scientist will tell you later. There was a classic one.
Well, I think about that with the microwave, right? It's like every time I use my microwave, I think about that. That was an accidental thing.
Oh yes, there's one of the most famous industrial chemical production things was actually invented by a couple of Germans who actually only invented it because they used a dirty flask. And the flask had the catalyst needed to make the damn thing work.
Well, here, let's since you brought it up, let's Skyviola. I was like, I'm gonna read the first little blip from that, and then we'll dive all into it.
And I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was like, I'll read the first bit of Skyviola here, and the first few lines, and then. And forgive me, I'll butcher the names. I always do, but I'll do my best, and then we'll talk all about it. So this is the first lines from the first in this. It's a trilogy, but it's all one story. So, Pallas Athena was in disgrace, but she felt that it was worth every gram of it, for she had immortalized herself, starting over 3,000 years before she was born. Yes. She knew that her career as a serious classical historian was over, and being consigned to this miserable cell was not exactly a career highlight. But on the bright side, the cell did not have a means of evacuation. If it had, and if there were even a remote possibility that such an evacuation could have been reported as accidental, she was quite certain she would have been consigned to the depths of space. Oh, what an exciting scene to start with. I love Ian, I love your books for like you said, they have thought to them. They're for people that want to think, but they also still have that thriller aspect. It's not like I would say more like suspense in that sense. And so it gets you to think, and it has suspense, and it's an interesting idea. So you told us a bit about the Skyviola series. It's about sending this prophecy back, and it gives you a little bit of scientific thought. So like tell us just a bit more about like the characters and kind of where they go.
I've lost the sound again.
Sorry, Ian. Yeah, tell us a bit more about the characters and kind of where they go. You told us a bit already, so tell us a bit about kind of where the series goes.
Okay, the concept of the series is, as I say, that Scaevola has to go and get help, but to get the first off, he has to be get to the place where there is help, and the problem then is that, okay, the fact that he understands orbital mechanics is enough to get him there. He's an oddity.
Uh-huh.
And he's going to be any help. So the second thing, or another thing that he has to do, is know something about military strategy. Now, one of the other themes about these books of mine is I've also tried to look at different forms of governance. And the Athena's prophecy and this next one, Legatus Legionis, is stuck in ancient Rome, and that was the concept of that was the dictator, effectively, the imperator. That, and I had a lot of fun writing about Caligula, who's is not quite what everybody thinks he is. He had a bad luck of having exiled Seneca. And Seneca hated his guts, and Seneca was his major source of information as to what happened, or what the man was like. So he's nowhere near like that. Scaevola had to go and learn some military strategy. The other text that I sent you, you'll see he's about to go out on his first expedition. But he eventually, the second thing about it is he was a Claudian. And so he actually became, shall we say, friendly with the Claudius, who was to become an imperator. And that gave him access to a legion to invade Britain. So the second book is actually as much as anything about the history of the invasion of Britain, and I've done it as accurately historically as I can. The first two books in the series are actually probably fairly accurate. Well, they're as accurate historical novels as I can make them.
Well, and so what's I'm curious from you then, like Ian, like do you ever come up with like rules for your book? For me, like every one of my books has its own little like internal logic. It has its own rule. Like my horror books, it has to jump. Every chapter has to jump back and forth between the male character and female character I have in there. And so it's all about like finding a way to get them across this town or ship or whatever. And like, so I'm curious for you, like, do you have like do you have a rule for yours? Like it has to be historically accurate, or it has to be like it has to have this much science in it. Do you have any? Do you set rules for yourself like that?
What's the historical? If I'm writing the historical thing, the rule is it has to be as accurate historically as I can, apart from the existence of the hero. I mean, obviously, everybody in that story, apart from Scaevola himself and a couple of his friends or something like that, were real people.
Interesting.
And they had to do what was really done at what they really did.
And I bet I can see that being really fun doing that. When I created my comic, I wanted to retell like Peter Pan, the story, but in a different way. But I had rules for that one, that it couldn't be against what kind of character they would be in the actual story. So I had a lot of fun with that. So was that a fun process, or was it a challenging process for you?
Oh, it was fun. The good news about it was that also for the invasion of Britain sort of thing, and for the part of where Caligula became an emperor, is that the history of it is effectively lost. You know, the Tacitus's annals, that covers the area where the volumes are lost. And so that means that one can make up all sorts of things as to what really happened that explains the few things that we do know.
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of the for example, if you look at Cassius Dio, the the explanation, he has 4 lines, I think, devoted to the embarkation of the invasion. The troops didn't want to. Claudius sent one of his freed slaves to talk them into it. The men refused to think, and then someone shouted out, "Yo Saturnalia," and they all boarded. Now, how the hell do you make that sound reasonable? Well, all I can say is read the novel. I've got what I think is a reasonable explanation of what actually happened.
Nice. Well, and again, our audience, if you're checking out, like those links are down in the description below. If you get interested and want to know how is that reasonable, then check it out down below there. So like what like um what were like any surprises, like were there any surprises for you digging back through history and picking this time period and looking through? Did you have any was sorry, I think I might have lost you for a second. Did you have any surprises that you found through your kind of research?
Oh yes, the one of the things that I actually found, one of the very few, there was a very few reports of an actual a lot of people who went to Caligula and tried to get him to change his mind on doing something. And exactly what happened is reported by Philo of Alexandria. And this is one of the most, I mean, okay, copyright's gone after 2,000 years. So I more or less copied that little section out for a couple of pages.
Yeah, I think it's, I think public domain expires at least after 2,000 years or whatever.
Yeah, so. Amongst other things, Philo's in no position to sue me.
Well, until you send back the message back in time. There's an eccentric up here writing about you.
See, I had to do some more research on him, on Caligula, and this is the weird thing. Everybody says he was a tyrant and that. He actually only ordered the execution. We can only attribute 13 people to him. And recall that he had 3 attempts, unsuccessful attempts to assassinate him. And so the owners of those 3 attempts tended to be another 13. Now, if you think about it now, that's not exactly a wild sort of, tyrant. That's not. I mean, if you had the right to execute people and they had been busy trying to kill you, what would you do?
Well, you don't know how many people try to assassinate me on this show, and I haven't killed any of them. Yeah, but I'm not I'm not any eccentric like you though. So so all right. So like what for you, like well, you have time travel in there, and you try to be as scientifically accurate as possible, but it's science fiction also has to have a bit of fiction. So like do you think time travel for us is possible, or sending a message back like that?
Sorry, I missed the question.
Oh, sorry about that. Do you think that time travel is possible, or sending a message back like that is possible, or is that just a bit of fiction for the fun of it?
That was a bit of fiction for the fun of it. Time travel. I actually, after the bit that you read, there's a little clip there which says why you can't go back in time. But the reasons, if you think about them, don't totally block out a message. If you can send, as long as you don't disturb the energy system that's around there, in wild theory, you could send a message back. Just how you do it, I've no idea. But that was good enough for the story.
Well, that's I'm curious. Where do you? Sorry, I lost you for a second there, Ian. Where do you like? where do you draw the line? Because I was like, it's like I had to ask myself that on certain ones of mine, like my horror books. I'm like, they're in a real world, so I'm trying to be as realistic as I can. But there was points where I was like, if it comes to between like fun or like accurate, I always sacrifice accurate for fun. Like, where do you have your balance?
I try. Well, first off, it's if it isn't going to be fun, it's not worth writing.
Well, and I don't want to make it sound like accurate isn't fun, because it's like it's within the logic of the book. So it's like some books is like
Yeah,
sometimes they're fun because they're like
basically.
accurate.
See, now the third one in this trilogy is Scivola's Triumph. That basically has an interstellar war sort of thing going on, and there's the limits of relativity that I.
Sorry, I lost you for a second. The limits of relativity.
Yeah, here's the interesting thing: you set off to another star to do whatever your mission, and when you come back, everybody who sent you is dead and been dead for several hundred years. How do you cope with that?
Well, and it's kind of that classic it's like, well, it's just interesting because it's like it's that classic thought experiment of if you travel at this super fast or whatever, you can kind of pause yourself in time almost in theory, and so it's just but yeah, it's like you said, how do you cope with the emotionality of that, like.
And it's my answers to that, of course, is that they do, because you either cope or you don't go. There's not much option.
Well, and I'm fascinated to see like where we go with that, because it's like a lot of what we talk about in science fiction is slowly becoming science fact, in a sense of planetary travel and things, and we're about to start heading that direction. So for you, I would say I'm curious, from your background in science and in science fiction, like this book series is kind of a look at where we're going as a species and as a planet. So like where do you see humanity in about 100 years from now? Hopefully not at the bottom of a nuclear crater.
No, I mean, obviously, this is the next thing about my science fiction books. I don't predict. It's more what I'd like to think might happen.
Yeah.
It's what I think is going to happen. I'm not a predictor. The only thing about the future is it's totally unpredictable. And furthermore, every time I try to predict something like a football score or something like that, I make a hell of a mess of it.
Well, that's too bad. I was going to get my lottery numbers from you coming up.
Well, what you should do is look at the ticket that I've got and then completely scrub those numbers. Try and find another set.
But, well, I don't know. You tried that before. You had the person stand out there and point in the right direction, and they didn't listen to them. So in the road.
Yeah. But no, we're in the novels that I've written about for 100 years. They were mainly about colonization of Mars. I don't, contrary to what some people think. I mean, it is possible that they'll do it quicker, but my attitude to the thing is that for us to attempt to colonize Mars now with the technology that we've got would be a bit like the Vikings trying to colonize America. Mm-hmm. You're rowing across the Atlantic in a boat or something. I mean, sure, you can actually get there, and in fact there's some evidence the Vikings did, and they got exterminated by the locals or something. I think that the approach that I've made is that first we've got to try and develop a better power system to make bigger spacecraft. And I've I've opted. Well, maybe company. I don't know if you heard about this latest jet thing. They've managed to get a nuclear fusion to run for 5 seconds.
Yeah, fusion's been an interesting one too lately because it's been heating up. I mean, so to speak. It's like definitely been speeding up. I was curious from you actually because you're also in energy with like biofuel as well. So like, I guess space travel is important to us. So what do you think is kind of like the most important scientific question we should attempt to answer in the next 10 years then, say the next decade?
My view is that our biggest single problem that we've got right now is climate change.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a single answer to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is no magic bullet as far as I'm concerned. What you have to do is fire a whole lot of little bullets at it, if this makes any sense. And this is why, you see, I think that biofuels themselves are a good thing. They can never possibly answer the whole question. But, at the moment, for example, they're rabbiting on about solar energy. Now, there was an item, and I've forgotten exactly, I think it was in Nature or somewhere like that, where someone has done the calculation that if you tried to make all the energy solar, you would need so many 1,000 billion ton of aluminium to hold the casings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the energy required to produce this element, I mean, we're not even talking about the solar collectors. We're talking about the things that hold the solar collectors. And the amount of energy required to that is just absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, well, because it's all like electrolysis for aluminium or whatever. And so that you need. And then also just the amount of cobalt for the batteries. So that's the big thing. It's the storage, it's the batteries. And that's kind of where you kind of come in with biofuel, right? Oh no, I think we lost Ian for a second. Dr. Miller, can you hear me? There you are, Dr. Miller. Sorry, we lost you for a second there. And so so we were talking about storage and energy, and I was saying it'll take a lot of cobalt or lithium, for a lot of with our current views on energy storage. And I think that's kind of what you were saying. It's not one answer, it's multiple answers. And biofuels I agree. I think biofuel is a great component of that.
Well, the interesting thing is, I saw back in it was around about 1980. There was a company that was. Remember, there was an energy crisis back then, and oil was hideously priced, and they had developed this means of using municipal refuse to make fuels, and they were going to build a 50-ton a day plant in Worcester, Massachusetts, and then the price of oil tanked. OPEC dropped it, to whatever. The project was totally uneconomic, so everyone's forgotten about it. But what that project says is A, it can be done, and B, we've probably lost the tricks there how to do it. So we actually need to regenerate all that work. We know we can do it in the lab scale. I've done it myself. I've made diesel, 100 cetane rated diesel, more or less, and 140 octane petrol.
I love how you get to casually say that. You're just like, I made fuels. It's like not so many people in the world get to casually say that. I think that's great.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about it is, I've made the components for jet fuel. Now, okay, they're only in little, small amounts, but the thing is, once you know it can work, it's a problem of making it work.
Yeah. Well, and
And
Andrea Hintz, by the way, we have people watching, and Andrea Hintz production says yes, that's amazing. So and Dr. Miller here is amazing. I agree. And Andrea, it's always great to have you. Andrea is a wonderfully supportive author of other people, and it's always great to have you on the show, Andrea. So sorry, Ian. And so Ian, I do want to make sure we get a chance to share a little bit of your book too. And getting back to Sky, sorry, pronounce it for me again. Skyvola, right?
yep, that's good enough.
Yeah, I was like, good enough is kind of what I go for on this show. Yeah.
And you may, just as an aside, you may be interested in the name. The cognomen of Romans tended to be a sort of a nickname based on something. Skyvola actually means lefty.
Means lefty.
Yeah, left-handed.
Interesting. And so why is that the significance?
Oh well, it just happened that he was in the start of the thing. The Imperator Tiberius gave it to him because he saw that when he was doing sword practice, he was left-handed. That's all.
Well, I was like, I suppose it's a good thing I didn't live in the Roman times, because I would be known as like clumsy or something, you know.
Well, the interesting thing is Kaiser, Julius Kaiser. That meant Kaiser meant hairy.
Meant hairy.
Yep. And the interesting thing about the Gaius Julius Kaisers, all of them, they were bald.
You said they were bald, I think. Sorry, you cut out for a second.
Yeah, they were bald, and the nickname means they were hairy. But one of their ancestors probably was hairy, but they all went bald.
Well, then in my case, it'd be like slowly going hairy then. So, well, all right. So here, let me share. We only have a couple of minutes, so I mean, time just flies on this show, and so, and I've just. I haven't even got to half of what I want to ask you always, Ian, because I love just hearing about your life. You just have an amazing life. And so I want to share a little bit about just from the book. So share with us, just give us the brief, like what's led up to this point of this scene that we're about to read.
Yeah, Scaevola has been sent as Tribunus Leclercus. That's the next second highest officer in a legion.
Okay.
He's had military training in theory from a Roman general, but he's never actually been in the field. He's been sent by Caligula to the governor Vitellius, who's governor of Syria, and of course the governor. It turns out that the legate of this legion is a drunkard, and the governor's really thrilled to have some, come in here. And this is This is the shall we say, the get together and the instructions sort of thing. And there's been a bit before this in which Scaevola has had to try and make out that he's not as useless as he could be. And anyway, okay. We come to this bit.
All right. Well, here, and I'm just gonna read it today. Normally, we'll go back and forth, but we're running a little short on time, so I want to make sure we get a little bit of it at least in there, because your writing is excellent. So I want to share at least a little bit of it, and then we'll come back to us, because we only have a couple minutes, sadly. And so until you can figure out, being the eccentric you are, how to manipulate time. And so anyway, to get back to our tale. Eventually, Pilate got around to finding this Christus guilty of claiming to be king of the Jews, hence of wishing to have his own unauthorized kingdom within the Roman Empire. There were about 100,000 witnesses, and they all testified against him, Gaius muttered in disgust. So, you're Pilate, and you find him guilty. What now? I suppose crucifixion. Exactly. Now ask yourself, why the 100,000 bore witness? Because they're pathetic. Wrong. because they knew this Christus had no intention whatsoever of leading a revolt against Rome. But this Christus died because he was gaining enough popularity that he was becoming a leader. He was filling the role of Messiah, and he refused to revolt against Rome. I see. Gaius nodded. In fact, he did not see it all, but he felt he had to say something. I really doubt it, Vitellius shrugged. I don't. What his followers are saying? I doubt I could guess, Gaius shrugged. They say he died because he had to, so he could fulfill the prophecy. He could have left it until later, Gaius frowned. It's not as if it wasn't going to happen. You can't apply that Roman style of thinking to these people, Vitellius said. As he wagged a finger at his young tribune. The key is that he had to die so he can rise from the dead. And sadly, we're running low on time because I want to keep going because there's more. Now, if you're watching and you want to check out these books, by the way, they're down below. I love again, Ian, you went back and you kind of applied some of the thinking at the time, and you kind of worked some of the thinking from the time, and I love that. I love how you kind of went from their perspective and got to dive into the history of it. So we're running short on time. I'm sad because I was like, there's always so much more I always want to get to, and I never get a chance to. But how can we? Diabolic Shrimp is a really good support community. How can we support you as an author and as a scientist?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear.
Sorry about that, Ian. I was like, how can we as a community support you as an author or as a scientist? Sorry, Ian, you cut out for just a second there. I want to make sure that our audience can hear.
No, seriously, if anybody wants to help me, there's mentioning my books in polite society is always a good thing. And
you came to the wrong place for polite society here. Just joking.
I'm sure some of the be polite.
Oh yes, everyone here is very, very classy. So, but well, excellent, Ian. And again, if you're watching, Ian's links are in the description below. We didn't even get a chance to talk about your music as well. Check out his music as well. Is also linked in his website down below. But Ian, I'm sad we were running out of time. Thank you so much for being on Diabolic Shrimp.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Well, I appreciate you. And Ian, I'm gonna send you back down below. Hang out for just a second. That was Dr. Ian Miller. Again, awesome books. Kind of goes with some history, some thrillers, some sci-fi, awesome scientific papers as well. If you want to check those out, if you like reading like me, I like to read scientific papers. Links for those are in the description. So definitely support him. Check out some of his piano music as well. Piano is my favorite. If you want to support this channel in a free way, you can hit that subscribe button down below or send in some comments. I always love to share those with our authors when they come on. And thank you so much for being part of this show. Andrea Hintz, Josh has great narration skills. Thank you, Andrea. I was like, sometimes I'm not so sure myself. So thank you all for tuning in and checking us out. This has been another Diabolic Shrimp. Have a good night.